Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tiffany Ackley. I am the mayor of Aliso Viejo and the chair of this group. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And I'd ask everybody to please rise and place their hands over their heart and give the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Let's go with item number 1, introductions and roll call. As I mentioned, my name is Tiffany Ackley. I'm the mayor of Aliso Viejo and the chair of this group. If we want to go down the list, that would be great. Starting with Debbie.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Maria will read roll for you.
Thank you.
Okay. When I call your name, please affirm presence. If you are sitting in as an alternate, please reply when the name of the primary committee member is read by stating your name and the name of the committee member you are sitting in as alternate. Okay. Tiffany Ackley.
Here.
Kay Hamons.
Here.
Debbie Neep. Bill Moorhead.
Here.
Sandra Jacobs.
Here.
Megan Hugh Schneider.
Here.
Kelly Jennings.
Here.
Lisa Bartlett. Mike Frost. Brad McKeer. Karen McLaughlin.
I'm here.
Steve Knobloch. Sue Kemp. Derek Reed.
Norris, Brandt sitting in for Derek Reeve.
Dave Wheeler. Doug Erdman.
Here.
Carol Moore. Betty Burnett. Brian Goodell.
Here.
Ed Mantic.
Here.
Nikki Montesedi. And Sergio Farias.
Maria, I just wanted to clarify real quick.
Yes.
Brendan Dugan, are you sitting in for Brad McGurr today? Okay. And Kevin Onuma is sitting in as alternate for Lisa Bartlett. And he needs to be promoted. If you can do that, please, Maria, just in case. And then Carol Moore, we didn't hear you, but I see you on the registrants. Are you in attendance? Okay. I just will say for the record, I see Carol Moore is on the list, as is Brendan Dugan. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. And Maria, do we have quorum at this point?
We do.
Great, thank you. That brings us to item number 2, public comments. Do we have any public comments today? Are there any public comments for today's meeting? Hearing none. That brings us to item number 3, approval of the minutes.
I'll move approval. This is Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District.
I'll second. This is Megan.
Great, thank you. And Maria, would you like a roll call vote, or do you just want to hear us all say aye?
I believe you can all say aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstain? Great. That brings us to item 4, presentation update on the San Juan Creek Watershed Group by Norris Brandt.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Executive Committee. My name is Norris Brandt. I'm the administrator for the San Juan Basin Authority, which is a joint powers authority formed way back in 1971 to oversee groundwater management in the San Juan Creek watershed. As far as the slides go, Jenna, no need to advance the slides. I'm going to just provide an oral report of the details that were already provided in the agenda packet. Our JPA is comprised of the city of San Juan Capistrano, Molten Miguel Water District, Santa Margarita Water District, and South Coast Water District. So together, our 4 member agencies provide water service to most of South Orange County. I'm here today to discuss our San Juan Creek Project Collaboration Forum, a periodic meeting of cities, water agencies, regulators, and any other interested parties to jointly conceptualize and then vet water projects designed to, number 1, bolster local water resources, and 2, to improve water quality in our streams and beaches. In March, when the 2-year SACWMA budget was presented to you as the Executive Committee, it included a line item entitled Regional Project Development and Stakeholder Framework for fiscal year 2022 and 2023, with a total budget amount of $85,000. At that time, Director Sandro Jacobs of Santa Margarita Water District suggested to this Executive Committee that San Juan Basin Authority take the lead on that effort, that budgeted item. Director Jacobs then came to my board at San Juan Basin Authority to highly recommend that as the existing regional agency responsible for the San Juan Creek watershed, San Juan Basin Authority should assist the county in this effort. My board, the San Juan Basin Authority Board, was in full agreement with the importance of a collaborative review of projects that brings all the interested parties together in a single forum. In response, Dr. Betty Olson, our chair of San Juan Basin Authority, directed me to develop the charter and mission statement provided in your agenda packet today. We expect to be underway facilitating our first project review in early fall. We are not requesting any SACWMA funding at this time, and no action by the Executive Committee is needed for us to proceed today. We will keep everyone posted when we have that first forum scheduled, and all the potential participants listed on the charter will be invited to attend. Thank you for including us on your agenda today. I would be glad to respond to any questions you may have about the information provided. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Norris. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Sandra?
Chair Ackley, hi, this is Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District. I wanted to thank you, Norris, for the diligence that you've put into this. I think it's an excellent direction to go in the San Juan Creek. And I appreciate and applaud all of your efforts. And I want to thank the SACWMA Executive Committee for allowing him to come here today. And the charter is in our packages, and I have reviewed it, and I had no other comments on it. Thank you, Norris. That's all I had.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I cannot see all of the participants, so if you have some, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
We have a question or a comment from Roger Buto. Maria or the IT team, can someone please unmute? Thank you. Go ahead, Roger. Can someone unmute him? You're unmuted, Roger.
He keeps muting himself.
Roger, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Once again, Roger Buto, founder and executive director of Clean Water Now, would ask Mr. Brandt to modify his statement. The San Juan Basin Authority, go to their mission statement and what their legal restrictions, as well as, I guess you could say, abilities are. They are not the responsible parties for the entire San Juan Creek watershed. So I would ask you, Mr. Brandt, to avoid hyperbole. That would be an exaggeration, to say the least. Number two, I would encourage you and the group that you formed, which I believe is a direct result of Clean Water Now proposing beginning several years ago, a South Orange County, actually, let me amend that, a San Juan Creek watershed science panel, some type of oversight group that could help expedite. We do not, in the San Juan watershed, we do not see that as being a viable, you can't make viable progress forward if it's modeled on what's happened in the Aliso. For those that don't know it, Clean Water Now is opposed to the county's continual denial of a program EIR for the Aliso Creek watershed, and we hope that Mr. Brandt, you and your constituents don't make the same mistake and try to piecemeal or sequential via sequential filings what in fact needs a program EIR. I'll finish with a distinct question. I assume that you, as the administrative assistant, are responsible, even though I know this was written by committee. I would ask you to please elaborate on the following statement. Projects are not slowed or overburdened by excessive or repetitive reviews. Could you please elaborate what you or the Basin Authority would consider overburdening, excessive, or repetitive reviews?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Roger, for the comment, if I may. I think in watershed efforts that I've been involved in, sometimes there are meetings that are automatically set on a periodic basis that will, on multiple occasions, talk about a specific project, for instance. And what happens is that that project continues to just be talked about, but nothing results from that talk, and it gets a little frustrating sometimes for participants. And so the idea here is to talk about a project, get as much input as you can, keep it moving. If we need to bring it back and share with, continue to share with others, we can do that. But the idea is to not just rehash projects over and over again to where they nothing gets resolved or moved forward.
Great, thank you, Norris. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, there is no recommended action other than to just consider the presentation. So thank you for that, Mr. Brandt. Next, item number 5 is a presentation from the Orange County Water Reliability Update.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Busslinger. I'm with the Municipal Water District of Orange County, or MODOC. Jenna, if you can go ahead and advance the slide. So was asked to put together a quick update on long-term water reliability planning. And Jenna, you can just go ahead and move through those kind of quickly. There's a couple of bullet points. So we'll talk about a quick introduction on water reliability planning, just kind of a real basics overview of the water supply sources, talk about Southern California's reliability planning challenges, talk about scenario planning, some results of some water demand forecasts that we have done and some updates, as well as Metropolitan Water District of Southern California's Integrated Water Resources Plan, or IRP, and then the status of where we are with updating our reliability study, and then we'll finish up with some questions. Next slide, please. So just from a real basic standpoint, we're answering 2 questions when we're doing water reliability planning. One is, what is the need? And we figure that out through doing future water demand forecasts. And then next, Jenna. The second is how do we meet those needs? So very basic. How we meet those needs actually has 2 components. The first here is supply reliability. Next. Which not only talk about changes in demand and supply, but also environmental restrictions and climate change. But the second part of this is it's not just enough to have enough volume of water to meet demands. Next. But system reliability, that the system can get the water where and when it is needed. Next. So that's talking about storage and conveyance systems to handle stressors on the system, such as seismic events that could limit water. Next. At the risk of giving you flashbacks to your economic classes, another way to look at this is simple supply and demand. We have the demands in blue coming down. We have unit prices on the vertical axis, the units being here acre feet, and then of course the quantity across the bottom. We look up at the top at $3,400 an acre foot. There isn't a whole lot of demand for water at that price, and as water prices start decreasing, demands, more people are willing to buy that water and put it to use. Those demands are not static, indicated here by the multiple demand curves. Those do change for a variety of reasons over time. Similarly, the orange indicates supplies at a low cost per at a low price per unit. There isn't as much water available, but as prices increase, technologies become more economically viable, such as ocean desalination or brackish water desalination systems, and also other supplies become available as people can figure out substitutions such as land fallowing and stuff like that. Next. And then one more. And so simply we call the difference between those supplies and demands the gap. Next. So the main sources of imported water supply for Southern California, you can see Orange County there, appropriately colored in the orange, just east of Los Angeles. There are three. The one in the north is known as the Bay Delta. The official title is the longer one at the top. That is supplied to Southern Cali through the California Aqueduct, also known as the State Water Project. The one in the middle is actually constructed and operated by LA, and that is to provide water to LA, and that's picking water up of the eastern Sierras from the Owens Valley and bringing that into Los Angeles. And then the third one, which was a principal reason for the creation of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, was the creation of the Colorado Aqueduct to bring water from the Colorado River watershed to LA. Next. So closer to home, Orange County, supply sources are broken up a little bit different. Next. For all of Orange County, about a third of the imported water for all of Orange County is imported, with over half of the water that is used in Orange County coming from groundwater, the rest being recycled and local water. Southern California, however, is a little different. Next. Over 75% of the water used in South Orange County currently, or this past year, is imported water, with recycled and local water making up the balance. Now, we have just recently completed the urban water management planning process as mandated by the state, which is a 5-year planning process. So looking forward, we have updated our forecasts for that. So next. So going forward out to 2045, all of Orange County looks to be reducing its imported supply from 33% to 25%. So even as a import water wholesaler, we see that diversification as a good thing. And for South Orange County, similarly. Next. Reduction in the reliance on imported water from approximately 77% to 62%, picking up some additional recycled water and desal water, as well as local water to round out the portfolio. Next. So moving on to some of Southern California's unique challenges. Those have to do with rainfall variability and climate change. This map here is an interesting one. It pretty well indicates the challenge that we have in Southern California with rainfall variability. We have the highest rainfall variability of anywhere in the nation. It is very uncommon for us to actually get average rainfall. We either get way too much or way too little, and that is largely due to two conditions. Number one is the Mediterranean climate, and number two is atmospheric rivers. Next. The other thing is climate change. So looking at what the latest global climate models are telling us, that's really telling us two different things. Next. So the first one has to do with precipitation, which you would think would have the most direct impact on our water supply sources. Unfortunately, the global climate models are not in agreement as to what is happening in California in particular. You'll see there that for both of what are called the representative concentration pathways or the trends in future CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, and I've got a little chart there on the right. The 8.5 is the one in which CO2 emissions go completely out of control. 4.5 is one in which we actually get them under control at some point in time. And for both of those scenarios shown here, particularly Northern California, where we get a lot of our imported water supply, does not show much of any change, and there isn't agreement whether it's going to be a little less or a little more. Next, and in case you're wondering where we are on that RCP, on that CO2 equivalent chart for the RCPs, we are bebopping somewhere between 411 and 421 parts per million, which kind of puts us right there at that crossroads. Next. However, next. For temperature, the global models are largely in agreement, and they are telling us that depending upon which pathway we ultimately end up on, we could see anywhere from 3 degrees Fahrenheit up to 5 degrees Fahrenheit change for California. And the reason that this really impacts water supply is the following. Next. So for the Colorado River, one of our major sources, they've actually been able to determine that for every 1 degree Celsius or 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit of increase in temperature, we are actually seeing 9.3% less water getting to the Colorado River. And this is mainly due to increased evapotranspiration and driven by snow level loss. Next. We're seeing similar results on the State Water Project, in which massive decreases or fairly major decreases in snow water equivalent, i.e. the snowpack. Instead of precipitation coming down as snow, it is coming down as rain. That is ending up going out to the ocean before we can capture it because of the increased difficulty of capturing that large amount of water over short periods of time. Next. And to kind of give you a sense of the magnitude of this situation, this graphic here is a little bit dated, but it does show the extent of this issue. The dark blue is the amount of volume in the 12 major California reservoirs. The light blue is 148 other reservoirs in California, and the green lines indicate the volume of water in the snowpack on April 1st of every year as it is measured. And as you can see, losing 15 to 30% of that snowpack volume, although that is not year-round storage, is a major issue for California as we move forward. Next. Forward again. So instead of just using one forecasted number as has been used in the past to say this is where we're going to be X number of years into the future, a lot of water reliability planning has moved to what is known as scenario planning. And scenarios are created to recognize the uncertainties of some of the drivers of possible future conditions. And one way to look at this, next, is if you have a sample driver, take weather, population, the economy, there is a range, a variability in over the long term on how that is going to impact water supplies and your ability to meet those water supplies. So in this particular case, this is a scenario planning strategy of 4 scenarios that looks at 2 drivers that have uncertainty attached to them that are critical to future decision making in future planning decisions. Next. Another way to look at this is that for each of the drivers, and again, you can look at the examples in the box, as we go forward in time, the variability or our lack of understanding of what is going to happen in the future increases. And therefore, over time, we have this kind of cone-shaped series of targets as we move out over time. And we really have 2 shapes here. We have the larger shape, which is the possible range of things that could happen, or the limit of the variability of that driver. And then we have a narrower range, which is what we call the plausible futures. And those are the range that is based upon evidence, that we have information that points towards these. So in scenario planning, you try and create these scenarios to capture that plausible variability of the future in order to set up a adaptive management strategy that will allow you to make changes as you move forward in time. Next. So in 2018, we completed the Orange County reliability study. We did use scenario planning, and we based it based on 2 critical drivers. One was climate change and the uncertainty of how bad it would get. And the second was going to be is the recognition that Metropolitan Water District of Southern California is not just going to sit there and let things happen. They are going to do something to react to those. And the question really was, what level of investments would Met make as a response to those climate change impacts? Next. So that resulted in the pink up in the top. We've got both minimal and significant climate change impacts as being uncertainties. And then from that, each one of those would be a set of Met investments that would respond to those uncertainties. Now, as we've moved forward in time, we are reviewing some of those assumptions on those investments. As you may recall, we put this out just after Metropolitan had approved funding for the 2-tunnel solution known as the water fix. Subsequent to the release of this document, the state withdrew its application for the 2-tunnel water fix and is now moving forward with a single tunnel called the Delta Conveyance Project. A lot of that is up in the air. That has pushed things back. It has increased the risk of this actually happening. Additionally, there is the Carson IPR project, which is what I call LA's solution to Orange County's groundwater replenishment system, being very similar. As you may be aware, the Orange County groundwater replenishment system takes sewage water from OC Sand, cleans it up, pumps it up to Anaheim spreading grounds, and then puts that into the basin to be used, to be further treated there by the basin itself, and then used as potable water. The Carson IPR would be slightly larger than the Orange County GWRS, but it would be taking water from LA Sand out in the city of Carson, pumping it up to the Santa Fe spreading grounds, and then and then percolating that into the basin. There's also some alternatives there in which that water could become source water supply for the Weymouth Water Treatment Plant, and even possibly our Deemer plant here in Yorba Linda. Additionally, the Local Resources Program, which is Metropolitan's investment in local resources, they provide up to $475 per acre foot for up to 15 years for any cost differential between the cost of imported water and what it costs for a local program. The question becomes, should that continue? Should that not continue? There are an awful lot of member agencies at Met who are trying to get off of the Met system. And the question really is should that be improved, stay the same, or decreased over time? And then the final one was a additional regional surface reservoir somewhere in Southern California. As I had showed on the introductory slide, Diamond Valley Lake is 810,000 acre feet. That was constructed by Metropolitan for the purpose of storing water for emergencies, particularly after a San Andreas fault type event. This 400,000 acre foot reservoir was looking at alternatives 2, 3, and 4 that were evaluated during the Diamond Valley Lake decision as the next likely feasible surface reservoirs. Our analysis in 2017 said that that did not make a whole lot of sense for what's known as the central pool, or the areas in which receive both State Water Project and Colorado River water. So we will be looking at that as part of an update. Next slide, please. So looking back at the reliability study demands from the 2018 study, those forecasts were actually done in 2014 for the 2015 OC reliability study. When we went to do the 2018 study, we figured that those demands still held true. Next. And so what we've got here is the red solid line indicates actual water use for South Orange County versus what was the 2015 forecasts. We had a high demand scenario, a middle scenario, and a low demand scenario. And in 2020, we kind of hit right in between, but in 2021, we've seen some bounce back, some additional water use. But generally, we are right in that area. And so for scenario planning purposes, we feel that those numbers were pretty good. But as I said, for the 2020 urban water management plans, we have updated those scenarios. And so next slide, wanted to take a look at comparing those older projections to the newer projections. Don't get lost in all the numbers. The only thing to look at really is at the bottom, the comparison of the two from 2025 through 2040. The differences between the new forecasts and the old forecasts are really within the margin of error for this kind of a study. So we feel that although that the 2018 numbers are a little different than the new ones, and we will use the new ones going forward, that we remain pretty much in the same ballpark as we talk about forecasting demands for the future. Next slide. So Met is now doing their Integrated Resources Plan, also known as the IRP. This is the first time Met is using scenario planning. And you'll see there a graphic which now should look somewhat familiar to the 2018 study, in which they're looking at multiple drivers that have variability attached to them, and they have constructed 4 scenarios known as A, B, C, and D. Next. So preliminary results on demands for Metropolitan. They have rolled up all of the analyses from the member agencies, and depending upon which scenario you're looking at, demands on Met look to be somewhere between 1.2 million acre feet up to just over 2 million acre feet in 2045. So that's really the envelope of demand that Met is looking at going forward into the future for what kind of investments they need to make. Next slide. So the gap analysis, so looking at now these gaps here, the red on these different scenarios, do not include any additional actions by Met to close the gaps. This is a gap based upon existing situation and known projects that are far enough along that they can be considered as projects that are going to be completed with a reasonable probability. But what this does show is that in 3 of the 4 scenarios, that going forward into the future, there is a likelihood of not having enough water in the entire MWD service area going out into the future. Next. However, the entire metropolitan service area is not equal. There is certain areas, particularly the northern portions of metropolitan service area, are only serviced by state water project water. They do not receive and cannot receive at this point in time water from the Colorado River. And therefore they're known as the state water project exclusive areas. In those areas, it is becoming evident that there will be shortages without further actions. Next. Next. So Metropolitan's goal is to have 100% reliability for its entire region under all four of those scenarios. Next. It was somewhat a surprise to Metropolitan that these shortages are as severe as are being shown in this model. Next. They are recommending that additional water management actions are needed to avoid a risk of shortages into the future. Next. And that it is becoming increasingly evident that the risk of not being able to serve all of the water that is needed is particularly severe and challenged in those state water project exclusive areas. Next. So just a quick recap on that state water project. Water is assigned through what is known as Table A. Next. There are 29 state water contractors that receive water from the state through the state water project. These I broke out into areas, except for Metropolitan. I broke them out separately from Southern California to illustrate that Metropolitan by itself takes over 45% of all of the Table A allocations. Next. And this chart shows over time the decreasing allocations for Table A as we go forward. Prior to 2014, anything less than a 35% allocation had never happened before. We did have the big drought. 2014 dropped down to 5%. It then subsequently recovered. And now we are back in 2021 with a 5% allocation. Next. The state is now looking at changing the rules, and it is likely that we will have futures in which there will be a 0% allocation going forward. So this is again just increasing the risk of those state water supplies. So next. So a few notes. So the IRP provides really a framework for future Met investment decisions. Next. It's also a basis for development of an adaptive management strategy. Next. But it does not authorize specific projects. It does not determine the amount of costs to be recovered, nor does it provide detailed rate projections or resolve how to allocate costs. Next. Met is targeting completion of the IRP in December. Originally, they had targeted July for this to be finished. With the modeling results that they have gone back on multiple occasions back to the experts, reanalyzed all of the input data, and they feel that they will be prepared to come out with a draft in late October or early November, and with board approval in December. Next. So that kind of pushed back MODOC's reliability study update. We wanted to be somewhat in sync with Met using the same numbers that they were using. Go ahead. So we have updated the demand forecasts as part of the urban water management planning process. MODOC helped facilitate the urban water management plan demand forecasts for most of the agencies in Orange County. Next. As I had stated, we will be revisiting the supply investment decisions or assumptions based upon the IRP and updated project situations next. And we're looking to complete this concurrent with completion with the Met IRP. Next. And with that, thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Great, thank you, Charles. Are there any questions from the committee members? If so, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District. Thank you, Charles. That was, let's see, in less than 12 minutes, the quite a rounding of everything having to do with water resources in South Orange County. So I appreciate all your efforts on that. I know there's still a lot of work to be done. You know, capturing stormwater is something heavy on the minds of the normal person, but it's a lot more difficult than one would simply say, you know, let it all flow to the sewers. But I appreciate your efforts in it. I know from the water industry, we've seen this before, but I really hope the cities and the counties that are here, a county that is here today, can get a feel for the progressive work we're doing in Orange County. And you may hear things on the news about Northern California and the problems they're going through, but you know, we really have our act together here in Orange County, and I thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Member Goodell has a question here. Can you talk about the zero allocations from the State Water Project? How does that come about?
Well, I think just recently in the news, there has been a lot of news being made that senior water rights have been curtailed. And our understanding is that will be a continuation of that. Metropolitan has been informed of such. This is, as the state moves forward with its vision of the future, this is something that is possible.
Okay, I don't understand that at all. They just gonna say, okay, we're just gonna cut you off Southern California?
Well, actually, they're not just cutting off Southern California. If you will look and see up in Northern California, who haven't done anywhere near the preparatory work that we have done for drought mitigation, they are also having their senior water rights curtailed. It is not just a north versus south issue. It is everybody with water rights, even those of you back to the 1910s, are going to be taking severe cuts going forward. This is coming as somewhat of a shock, as you can imagine, to just about everybody. But that is what the state is currently signaling.
And what did they propose to do with the water instead?
You know, they're saying it is a drought. The water is not available. You can look at the existing reservoirs. Even the largest reservoir in California, Lake Shasta, as well as the second largest, Lake Oroville, are already down to about 33%. We have in California not done a good job of keeping up with the amount of reservoir storage that we need to supply all of our citizens, and therefore we are when the system gets stressed, you are seeing basically some of the wheels falling off in different areas, and this is one of them going forward.
And I can point out the obvious that even at the same time, the state is forcing all our municipalities to increase our housing allocations. So it's quite a conundrum. Thank you.
Yes.
Could I, Madam Chair, this is Sandra Jacobs. I hear where you're coming from, Council Member Goodell. Yeah, that state water project allocation, keep in mind that because the state runs that, we're going to pay for that, whether or not we get a drop of water or not. And I brought this up with the new general manager for Metropolitan, and a lot of his future tasks will be working with the state and the governor's office in trying to make that a fair allocation. But if there's no water, there is nothing to allocate, which makes it even more important that we have local resources And is there anything we can do about it? You know, short of a protest, not quite sure. But I did have one other question for you, Charles. On your slide, I think it was, I forget which one it was, maybe slide 5. If you could differentiate between the local water and the groundwater that you mentioned, what is that local water that you referred to on your slide?
And this is something that MODOC needs to go back and update theirs. We basically have termed all non-OC basin water as local water, and that for for South Orange County needs to be changed. Now, thank you for that. Yes.
Thank you.
Chair Ackley, we have a comment from Carol Moore.
Great,
Yes,
thank you.
I had a question. When you're providing by the way, it was a very good presentation. I very much appreciate it. And all the work that's gone in to get us where we are. I do very much appreciate that. What I'm wondering about, in larger picture of the Pleistocene and the Holocene geologic periods, we've looked back and we've seen really large portions of time that have been drought. The climate seemed to swing in 1800-year periods, approximately, maybe 2000, varying. When you're looking at that, and because we've examined pollens in the sediments in the ocean and under lakes, and we also understand what we believe we understand, the forest fires that occurred during those periods. So we know there were fires when there was great heat, and we've seen these periods again. Do you include those possibilities because of the fact that we know tremendous droughts have occurred in the past? That we've lost lakes that we've had huge lakes that covered the basin and joined huge lake areas all the way down into Utah, and then those receded during those dry periods. So do you include that? Do you consider that as a possibility in the scenarios?
So thank you for that. And you know, when we talk about possible versus plausible futures, those are things that are moving from the possible to the plausible. And so that's where we keep looking at updating our scenarios to include as we get more information. And you have very correctly put your finger on some of the scientific information that's coming in. They've also done quite a bit on tree rings, which only go back a few thousand years, that have indicated that we used to think that droughts were in 7-year cycles. We have a lot of evidence now that they can be 19 to 20-year cycles, which, by the way, Colorado River Watershed is in a 20-year drought right now. So there is, you know, just this heaping abundance of evidence building up that droughts are going to be longer than we thought. Whether they are longer than they were in the past is really kind of an academic debate. We now have evidence that they have occurred for long periods of time. We have evidence now that they are occurring for longer than what we had anticipated before. So that indicates, how do we handle this? Obviously, water use efficiency is a huge tool in the tool shed, but you know, you can't make low flush toilets produce water. I mean, at some point there is a maximum or a minimum water usage that you can get to. And the question becomes, what do you do next? And so that's where a lot of things come on the table. You know, the Orange County groundwater final expansion, the reason it's called the final expansion for recycling water is once that gets done in 2023, all of the available sewage water for OC sand is going to be captured and recycled. There isn't any more. We're looking for more and looking to see if we can actually start importing sewage water. LA is going to go the same way. South Orange County is looking, can they maximize? I think Santa Margarita is up to about 80% now recycling, and you know, so they can get another 20%, but they can't get another 100%. So the question becomes, what things become available? And like I said, as water prices increase, other sources of supply get available. And one of the things, going back to that 0% allocation, those of you who were at Jeff Keitlinger's farewell dinner about a month ago that MODOC put on, he had indicated in the past when we went into allocations, there was always somebody out there, one of the 28 other water contractors that might be able to sell Met some water. Well, when you have 0% allocation, nobody has any water. The system is dry, and therefore that ability to take on something from someone else who's willing to sell it to you disappears. So these things start becoming compounding issues as we move forward. Obviously, storage being not just the physical volume of reservoir storage, but how do you get it into and out of whatever you're going to store it in quickly enough to meet your needs is also critically important. So these are all things, to answer your question, that we are looking at going forward into the future. Which is why it's not quite as easy as how much do you need and where do you go and get it. It's much more complicated than that.
Thank you. There was one other thing there too, though, that even though there are these long periods of drought that become much more severe, and we're not even near the most severe that we've seen in tree rings and sediments and the pollen studies and so forth, that when they have events, the events themselves, these atmospheric rivers become even larger. So what are we thinking about there? Because I think that even though right now the thought of a flood seems so remote, actually that's not way out there.
Well, and that goes back to what we call put and take capacity, the ability to get the water into wherever you're going to store it, whether it is a groundwater basin or a reservoir, as quickly as it's coming. And that's one of the problems with the melting of the snowpack. We're getting more of it in a shorter period of time. Think of a freeway in which you have those on-ramps with the lights. The reason those lights are there is to control how many people are trying to get onto that freeway. We don't have those lights in the water system. The water just comes rushing down the hill. How do you get it into the ground? There's a lot of work being done right now. Can you flood certain fields and use that to percolate? But again, there's a limit in how fast that can get into the ground. So there's a lot of research needed into being able to just capture and get it into where we can store it as quickly as we can to capture as much as we can. Otherwise, it ends up out in the ocean. And obviously, if we start having water shortages, going back to that simple supply and demand graph, water prices are going to go up. And as they go up, other technologies become viable. And these are all things we need to look at in California as what our future may entail.
Chair Ackley?
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know that once we've completed executive committee member comments, we do have a public comment from Roger Buto.
Okay. Are there any other committee member comments? Hearing none, let's go to the public comment, please.
Have to unmute me.
I hear you, Roger.
You hear me 5 by 5?
Yep.
Bet you guys don't know what that means. It's an old NATO term. It means clearly. Thank you. Once again, Roger Buto, Clean Water Now. First, I want to welcome an old friend of mine back, Keith Vander Matten, I apologize, the Dutchman. Keith, I guess Central California wasn't interesting enough, so you come back and you're here in my home city, Laguna Beach. So want to welcome you back, Keith, and thank you for attending. Secondly, I want to let this group know that I'll get it out to as many as I can. I have written a 1,200-word column for Voice of OC in their community section. It should be posted any day, and it is on topic with what Mr. Busslinger just discussed. It is, in fact, about, I call it a tale of two counties. I think there's still not enough public education out there, and even among public officials. We're in a completely different situation in South County. We're almost totally reliant. Let's set the desal aside. For the rest of the supply, above ground reservoirs. So my column is basically on above ground storage and including accolades to Molten Miguel, Santa Margarita, and the ranch for their endeavors to create and carve out. We're in a very fortunate place. For those of you who don't realize it, we still have a little bit of above ground open space, although it obviously is expensive open space if we had to purchase it. So I will get that column to as many as I can when it is posted. Last, you, Mr. Busslinger, I want to thank you deeply and profusely. I think you're able to explain things in such an incredible manner. And Charles, we go way back. I cannot thank you enough. I like the way you not only explain things, but you're able to go all the way from the layman's terms up into the highest technical, I guess you call it granular data, and to be able to explain it. I think you possibly know Dr. Erwin Schrödinger, who said, if at the end you cannot explain your doing, you've done nothing. So Charles, you've done a lot. We've been interacting for I don't know how many years since you were at the county, and I cannot thank you enough, not only for our friendship, but also for your ability to perform the way you did today, because it is kind of a performance. And so once again, thank you for the thorough explanation, especially fielding the very astute questions that I heard coming from members. So thank you for your time.
And your check is in the mail. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time?
No.
Right. Hearing none, the recommended action is to receive and file. I don't believe we need a vote on that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Moving
No.
on. Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, presentation, San Juan Aquatic Passage and Habitat Improvement Project. Emily Fudge, are you with us?
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to unmake myself. It sounds like I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Cleveland National Forest for including us in the grant initially, and then also giving us the opportunity today to present our project accomplishments. My name is Emily Fudge. I'm the forest hydrologist on the Cleveland, and our project was the San Juan Aquatic Passage and Habitat Improvement Project, located in the San Juan Watershed, the Greater San Juan Watershed. We had multiple agencies that we coordinated with throughout the life of the project, from planning to implementation, and we also wanted to thank them as well. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. Great. Okay, so this is just a quick overview of the project benefits that we had. Primarily, the project was for natural resource protection with secondary water quality improvements. Overall, the project costs a little over 1.5 million, although the Forest Service did expend additional funding on related actions throughout the life of the project from a variety of other sources. And then we received $700,000 from the grant. Next slide. That's a picture of our pre-dam, one of our dams before removal. Okay. So these are project maps. The Cleveland is spread out. We extend from the Mexico and US border up to Corona in Riverside County. And the map on the left, you can see the outline of our northern district, the Tribuco Ranger District, which encompasses the headwaters upstream of Orange and Riverside counties. And the entire project is within that greater San Juan watershed. Although the majority of the components that I'll be talking about occurred within the Arroyo Tribuco subwatershed. The little diamonds on the map on the right are the locations of the dams that were treated within the project. The map on the left is a close-up of Tribuco Canyon, where we conducted invasive weed treatments. The red is the existing infestations, and the pink is where we were actually able to treat the project. Next slide. Okay, so our project had 3 main components. We had the aquatic passage improvements, which included removal of 7 dams and replacement of 2 stream crossings as part of the larger project to remove 81 dams and replace a stream crossing with a bridge. So we had several aquatic passage barriers in the greater watershed. So this one would address 7 dams and 2 crossings, as well as that larger bridge. We also had the second component was removal of invasive fig and other non-native species. We were to treat 5 acres in addition to previous arundo treatments from 2012, English ivy in 2015. And then, like I said, there were a few components that were treated during the life of the project, and that was post-fire tamarisk prevention in 2019. Third component was for water quality and habitat protection. Water quality protection and habitat restoration through hazmat removal and site restoration. So overall, the project goals were to contribute to the larger regional effort to implement the recovery plan for southern steelhead and improve aquatic passage in the greater San Juan watershed. And then also invasive weed removal and habitat restoration in the headwaters would improve ecosystem sustainability and water supply throughout the watershed. Next slide. So how do these components contribute to drought resilience and sustainability, especially in response to climate change and preparation? Well, invasive plant removal enhances the quality of aquatic habitat and improves water availability for native plant resources. Many invasive species use more water than native plants, so removal would increase water supply and water yield. The fig has a deep, extensive root system and uses large quantities of groundwater. Tamarisk and arundo also use larger quantities of groundwater than do native plant species. Tamarisk will also change salt distribution within the soil profile. They concentrate salts at the surface, which makes it harder for native plants to grow. So they will replace native plants. Upgrading stream crossings will prepare for increased debris flows or flooding that could result from more extreme storms or from fires. And we might see more fires if we have a drier climate. We did see that with, we did see a post-fire flood event from the Holy Fire in 2018 with our new bridge that we had installed, and I'll talk about that later. Overall, restoring natural habitat and stream connectivity will promote a resilient ecosystem for native species and reduce competition for native resources. Next slide, please. This is a picture of one of our dam sites in Tribuco Canyon. Historically, these dams had been installed for recreation and to improve fishing opportunities in the area, but they hadn't been maintained for years. They constricted the channel, they were causing erosion, there were plunge pools below, sediment accumulation upstream. They're undercut, they're not functioning, and they're really, the only thing they were functioning as were aquatic organism migration barriers. So, and also safety concerns. People would hang out on them, fall, hurt themselves. So in 2014, well, in 2012, the plan to improve the steelhead habitat came out. And in 2014, the Forest Service started to implement their dam removal project of those 81 dams. And we began with Tribuco and Holy Jim dam removal. And it has continued until just recently, and we're almost near completion, the entire 81 dams, of which this project contributed. Next slide. I took the photo on the left is from 2014, right after removal. It's the same site as the previous slide. And then after a few winters, we have the photo on the right. So it takes a couple of years, but what we saw is that, and this is what we saw with most aquatic organism barrier removals, is that the sites need 1 or 2 years or a sizable storm to really recover, where sediment can be redistributed. And we see, the plunge pool was filled in, but we saw the creation of new pools, natural riffles, sediments being redistributed, the grade has been changed. We saw stabilization of areas that were previously eroding and increased connectivity for aquatic organisms. Next slide. And this is a photo from a dam site in Holy Jim Canyon. See the dam on the left, and then removal, right after removal on the right. Next slide. And then in that photo on the left, we see that after removal from in 2016, you can't even tell that there was a dam there. That's looking downstream. The others were looking upstream. And the photo on the right is another section of the stream channel where we had aquatic barriers removed, and you can't really tell that there was anything there, and that's because it had a couple of winters for the channel to adjust. Next slide. So we had the bridge installation in Tribuco Canyon, where we replaced a low water crossing, and you can see from the photo on the left there that the crossing was unstable. It was impassable during large flows, is being undercut. There's erosion. There's a huge plunge pool below. Again, a large sediment plug upstream of this crossing. And we replaced it with a bridge. This site had blown out several times in the past until we got federal funding to install a bridge there instead. The elevation difference above and below the crossing was 8 feet, so that definitely posed a pretty big aquatic organism barrier for anything trying to migrate. Next slide. So this is the photo on the left is a picture of the bridge at project completion. You see a lot of riprap. The channel really hasn't had a chance to adjust, but we had the bridge installed in 2015, and we saw with the dams, the site needed the few storms and winters to redistribute sediment and establish a more natural channel. And one of the benefits of the bridge is that it was able also to pass large post-fire flows that we saw from the Holy Fire in 2018. And whereas when we saw other locations that did not have a bridge or an improved crossing, those locations washed out or became impassable. Next slide. Sorry. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so this was an interesting. We saw this happen during the Holy Fire watershed response. The channel migrated across the canyon bottom. That was the picture on the left is from 2018 before the post-fire flows, and then the photo on the right was in 2019 after we had a sizable event. And it had slowly migrated, but there was a big flood event on February 14th, 2019, and it completely moved over to the other side of the canyon bottom. The bridge had enough capacity to pass that flow and didn't artificially confine the channel. So the benefit was that the crossing no longer posed a barrier, and these large flows could reset the channel features, creating new gravel bars, pools, riffles, and redistributed sediment. It really allowed that habitat to reestablish. So that was one of the benefits of that situation. Next slide. Bottomless arches was the last component of our aquatic organism barrier, larger component. So this is in Holy Jim. Photo on the right, or photo on the left is the pre-project photo. You can see a couple of dams. There's some in the background. You can't really see them, but this crossing was again undercut, causing erosion downstream, had a plunge pool, posed an aquatic organism barrier. And the photo on the right was from this year, 2021, after the crossing had been installed and had a couple of winters. So the channel was able to adjust. Next slide. This is the same site looking through the crossing from upstream to downstream. And you can see the connectivity that we have now, and that vegetation is coming back. There is no aquatic organism barrier. Animals and organisms can freely move up and down the channel. Next slide. This is the second crossing in Holy Gem Canyon, where we put in a bottomless arch. The site on, or the photo on the left, again, the pre-photo, it's undercut, huge plunge pool downstream, aquatic organism barrier. This crossing became impassable during the post-fire flows. You can see a lot of the sediment that they'd already cleared off some, but there's just so much sediment upstream. And the photo on the right is the post-fire photo, where you can see there's improved connectivity, and sediment can be easily transferred down channel. The benefits of these arches is also that vehicle traffic is moved out of the channel, so aquatic organisms are not impacted by vehicles and traffic. Second component of the project, the greater project, was the invasive weed removal. Oh, sorry, yeah, next slide. We focused on treating the thick stands of fig, although we did also treat tamarisk after the fire to prevent infestation, and we had treated arundo and English ivy. The fig was really the focus here. It was originally planted in a private grove a long time ago when people started moving into the canyon, but has since expanded throughout the canyon in places and has become the dominant plant, which has replaced native habitat. Before the project, we really hadn't treated fig, and there wasn't really a lot of information out there about how to treat the fig, especially in this density. So with this grant, we were able to fund a pilot entry for treating the fig, and we're still in the process of determining the success of the method, but so far it's been really good. We're looking at getting more funding to move further with treating fig in the canyon. But we did treat arundo and we did treat tamarisk. Next slide. These are a couple of photos. The one on the left shows the dye treatment. The one on the right, that's a photo of fig just all over the channel. So it really is the dominant plant in so much of the canyon. But how we treated it is we used herbicide, basal application with dye using a backpack sprayer, so hand crews. This really helps using the dye helps minimize the amount of herbicide we use because we can see where it's being sprayed. We don't retreat the same locations, and it helps us monitor so that herbicide is not discharged to the channel or live water. But again, we are continuing to monitor our treatments, and we're looking for future funding sources to continue to treat the fig population and get it under control. And the benefits of treating our invasive weeds, like I said before, invasive weeds tend to use more water than the native plants. Next slide. Oh, good, you got the, okay. Yeah, next slide. So hazmat cleanup and site restoration is our third and last component. In 2017, we had 3 cabins that burned in the Tribuco Creek floodplain. With site and soil analysis, we identified the presence of hazardous materials from those burned cabins in the floodplain of Tribuco Canyon. And so although we had temporary stabilization treatments installed, we wanted to prevent the transport of materials offsite, long term, and how that could impact water quality. So it was essential to remove them permanently from the area. And then also, this is in the floodplain, so riparian habitat would also be improved by restoring the site and removing everything. Next slide. Photo on the left is a photo of the site after initial cleanup. So they removed the contaminated soils and took it off for us and disposed of it according to regulations. And the photo on the right is a photo of the restored site this year. So we have natural habitat coming back. We have vegetation reestablishing, and that's really important because it is in the floodplain, and it can provides riparian habitat provides so much more. It's very sensitive, and lots of animals and plants rely on it. Next slide. So overall, the project accomplishments: we opened up 7 miles of stream for aquatic organism passage. We contributed to the regional effort for improving aquatic passage as laid out in that 2012 plan for the regional effort of reestablishing steelhead habitat. We decreased the jump height at treated sites. We improved over 168 acres of habitat, resulting from improving the riparian corridor and invasive weed removal, as well as the barrier removal for aquatic organisms, and also the site restoration. And sediment reduction at treated sites. We returned them to a more natural sediment transport regime, and improved channel condition through dam removal and channel connectivity. So moving into the future, we do continue to build on these efforts and prevent other invasive weeds from moving in, removing the fig, and addressing other related aquatic organism barriers in the San Juan watershed. And with that, are there any questions?
No.
Madam Chair.
Chair Ackley, I have a question. This is Ed Mandich.
I apologize. Go ahead, please.
Okay, Emily, thanks for your presentation. I'm up in Tribuco Canyon area, so I've spent a fair amount of time up there mountain biking, hiking, and it's real interesting to see what you've done up there, and I really appreciate your presentation. I'm curious if you know when the access to the public will be open again. The gate's been locked and there's signs up for closed to public access. Do you know when that'll open up again?
So that would be with the district ranger, but I unfortunately do not have an answer for you. I'm not part of those conversations. So I am sorry.
Okay.
I know that there's a lot going on, and but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
This is Betty. I have a question. I'm not real sure how to raise my hand though, so I'm just going to jump in if that's okay.
Of course. Go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, I'm just interested. First of all, great presentation, super interesting. But I was wondering if Emily could help us with how did she find the process of the grant itself, and how easy or difficult was it to comply with grant-related requirements and reporting that went along with using grant funding?
Well, I think initially some of the application, because the project is a little different from what I remember. It's been a while since we applied for this grant. But I remember initially thinking that some of the questions or requirements, it was a little challenging to fit our project into those boxes. And the same thing, I think some of, yeah, because it's hard, it's some of the trying to get measurables from some of the treatments that we have, it's a little bit challenging to see how dispersed, how you might measure yield in a location that isn't measured, and also dispersed invasive weeds. We'd had to go off of papers and studies to understand, to come up with some measurables. But overall, but other than that, with some of the progress reports and reporting, I mean, I don't know if it was any more challenging for us than it was for anyone else. Did that answer your question?
I just, if you had an opportunity to bring a similar project forward for funding, would you believe that it would be valuable to access funding through the IRWM mechanism as you did before?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. One of the things we had another IRWM project in San Diego, and one of the things that I felt that this grant really was great was that we built a lot of partnerships and we looked at landscape treatments. So we had to find someone first in San Diego, we had to find someone be a local project sponsor, but in that situation, it was really great to try to have a landscape scale treatment and work with other people, because our problems don't end at borders. They extend across borders and don't care about ownership. And so when we all work together, we can get there together. We can address those problems.
Thank you.
So I do think that these are really great opportunities, and I think they allow us to work together across boundaries.
Great, thank you. I saw Sandra Jacobs' hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Sandra Jacobs, Santa Margarita Water District. Thank you, Emily, for that presentation. I had a couple of questions, and Tiffany, cut me off if I ask too many. Let's see. How are you proposing the ongoing maintenance of the invasives removal for years down the road, or was this just a one-time chunk of money to get things started and you're going to have to ask for grants going on? And kind of piggybacking on that, I had heard that there was a herbicide that we had used for some of the arundo removal that's being withdrawn by the manufacturer for various reasons. And is that going to impact your ability to keep that arundo under control? Because it does suck a lot of water, more so than the native plants. So I think that's doing it by hand is pretty labor intensive. So that's kind of where I was on that question. The other question, and it had more to do with the steelhead and opening things up. Do you really expect the steelhead to make it up to that area of the headwaters? And where do you see any potential conflicts between what's going on up in this area of the San Juan Basin versus some of the proposed projects going on in the southern portion of the San Juan Basin? Thank you.
Okay, so as far as the arundo, and forgive me, I'm not our invasive weeds specialist, so I will answer to the best I can. With the herbicides, I know we have multiple methods when we're treating invasive weeds, so I'm not sure which one they're recalling for the herbicide. Right now, I mean, we continually monitor for invasive weeds. That's a huge impact to our native lands or natural headwaters and things. So we really do have a big effort to at least monitor, and then we have methods to treat as soon as we detect when we have the funding. And we did intend for this to be a pilot project for treating fig. Like I said, we didn't have any experience treating fig in the past, and it isn't really one that had a lot of, we could find a lot of information about either. So what we have seen has been good. We're going to continue to monitor that and see if, one of the issues we were concerned about is that we're creating a lot of biomass, and we don't want to have a lot of standing dead in a canyon that might be prone to fire. So we're trying to treat it in small portions and figure out how we could treat some of the denser sites in the future if the herbicides are successful. It's just like developing a project over time. And with Arundo, yeah, luckily most of the Arundo we treated in 2012 did not come back in our portion, although there is Arundo on downstream of us, downstream of the Forest Service on, I think it's county land below our border and private land below. So we see that all the time, but we don't have the authority to do anything off Forest Service land. And then as far as whether or not for the steelhead and those coming back, there is a huge, I'm also not the biologist, so this is a little bit of a challenge for me to answer this. I'll do the best that I can. They believe, yes, that they can, especially in the main tributaries. Once they remove a lot of the barriers downstream. And since there has been this huge effort on the Forest Service side, we have had other agencies, we've seen them moving in that direction as well, with looking at aquatic organism passage downstream. One of the big ones was on the 5, and I believe that they're working to address that crossing down there. As far as conflict with the conflict, there's always conflict, but that's why we have these meetings and these groups that come together to try to make sure that we're working together, or at least we're aware of the goals of each other's, of regional efforts and regional goals, and trying to figure out how we can all work together to make sure the needs of each agency or each group is met. I mean, we only have authority on Forest Service land to have, we can't tell other people what to do. But if there is an effort to move towards something like the plan, the 2012 plan, we can do our part on the Forest Service land to contribute to that effort. And yeah, and then through collaboration and coordination, we can work with other agencies and things on other projects. But yeah, I would say that our participation in groups, regional groups, is the best way to address those situations where there might be conflicts of interest.
Well, I appreciate you trying to answer that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I think I also saw Kay's hand up.
I did have a question, but Emily answered it in the course of answering Sandra's question. Emily, good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the executive committee? Hearing none, are there any public comments on this presentation?
I see Roger Buto's hand is raised.
Okay.
Okay, am I on again?
You are.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging the only NGO that seems to continue to track, monitor, as well as provide input to this committee. I think many of you know, I seem to be the only NGO that's interested, at least the one not getting any money, to come to your meeting. So we appreciate this committee. Secondly, we would also like to thank you for allowing the presenters to finish their presentation before questions are asked. One of my personal pet peeves is constant interruptions. There's if you don't mind a water joke, a certain flow for presenters. I thank you, Emily, for your presentation. Fantastic. First, like to note, if you weren't aware of it, which you didn't seem to be, Clean Water Now is the only, once again, NGO to vehemently be opposed and to hold San Juan Basin Authority's feet to the fire regarding the use of glyphosate in the lower San Juan. And we will continue to do so. And yes, the manufacturer has agreed within 2 years to remove that from their product line of weed killer, including Arundo removal. So we just know they're going to find something else that'll be a disruptor, but one world at a time. Second, to move on, we would like to note that Clean Water Now has worked with the Sierra Club, Rural Canyons, and I believe, I can't remember Ray Chandouse's foundation out there, but both Rural Canyons and whoever, I can't remember Ray's affiliation, but we have worked with them for the last 20 years. We did interview and we saw crude video from the 50s that showed people taking steelhead in their freshwater phase, that is as rainbow trout, up in near where the old Arizona crossing is between O'Neill Park and Coto de Caza. We have no doubt, we never did doubt that steelhead ran that far. That may seem impossible to some, but once again, as Emily's agency has pointed out, a lot of it has to do with impediments or barriers that have been put in place subsequently. So these fish are opportunistic and they run up, mate and breed maybe halfway, and then move upstream at the next major rainy event. So they are an opportunistic species. They do not have to return to the stream of their birth or origin. They'll run up any coastal stream. Moving on, I do have several specific questions for you, Emily, if you don't mind. Are you or have you planned on doing, and how soon, assessments or surveys? We have been out to Pete and Lisa's Audubon ranch and have actually seen, to our surprise, chub, three-spine stickleback. And we're kind of curious if you're going to be doing surveys for them. More importantly, in the hyporheic zone, that is the moisture on the riparian banks, if you're going to be doing arroyo toad population assessments, and also for the other gamut of threatened or endangered species. So at what point, I guess I'm really asking, Emily, at what point do you guys launch a survey? If you ever do and you need grant money for that, we will be your strongest advocate to get grant money for that. So please keep us informed, because we think a proper survey, maybe it's a 5-year post removal, but we would certainly like to see that assessment to not only justify but sustain Forest Service excellent efforts. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Yeah, we do regular assessments and surveys for T&E species and our forest sensitive species. Our biologists are in charge of like setting the schedules and working with Fish and Wildlife, and yeah, so they manage that program and set the schedule for what schedule and where they go. But Kirsten Winter is our contact on the forest. She's the forest biologist. She's more in touch with where and when. But I definitely know she's surveying for arroyo toads, and she talks about them a lot.
Great, thank you. Are there any other public comments?
I do not see any.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to Executive Officers Report. Amanda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Amanda Carr, Executive Officer for the committee. Got a few quick updates on the EO report. First off, the reason why we're all able to meet in this manner was the governor's executive order N0821. If you've been tracking sort of Brown Act and remote meeting issues, the governor has designated that this order is to sunset on the 1st of October. So we are looking at and monitoring progress on this, especially given kind of the changes in where the pandemic is going. But we will be keeping you up to date on what we will be doing for our November meeting. Once the order sunsets, we would be looking to transition back to in-person meetings, since that would be what would be required of us. However, we all know that has some inherent challenges, and we're basically sort of at the mercy of whether or not we can find locations that are willing to host meetings. So All of this to say is, you know, buckle up. Everything has been exciting so far, and we'll keep you updated on what our options will be for our November meeting as soon as we know. Quick update on the Aliso Creek project collaboration. Meetings were held on May 25th and June 24th, and were focused on an alternative approach to restoring the lower 6 miles of the main stem. The master planning for that effort was well received, and responses to comments are being developed. And that's helping us track the input that we're getting from stakeholders on this effort. Prop 1, Round 1, our grant agreement was finalized with the state on July 6th. And we are in the process of finalizing our implementation agreements with County Council, and the MODOC regional project will be the first to execute an agreement as a local project sponsor. Please note, for all of the projects who received funding under this round, it is a new requirement with this grant that all projects must complete their CEQA and other necessary permitting for construction within 18 months. So to our project proponents, please be aware of that new time requirement. Proposition 1, Round 2. We are still working with DWR on giving them input on potential schedules, along with the San Diego and Upper Santa Margarita IRWM regions. We expressed a preference for a later grant submittal deadline in fall of 22 versus spring of 22. And we are waiting for DWR to distribute a survey to all IRWM regions requesting feedback. So we're continuing to work with DWR on the next grant round release. I'm sure most of our water district partners are aware, but just for the rest of the group, and it's all very timely given Charles's presentation earlier today. You know, most of the state is in drought. Eight counties, including Orange County, are not yet in the emergency drought declaration, but we're tracking that issue. And also we're tracking within the governor's final signed budget, there was $3.7 billion earmarked for climate resilience over 3 years, and with $440 million targeted for distribution by June of 2022. The state is currently deliberating on deliberations on how this will be rolled out are expected to resume in mid-August. And staff is continuing to monitor the fiscal year 21-22 state budget trailer bill, which is AB 148, for drought relief funds tied to emergency declaration. So we will keep you updated on progress with that. Just a few housekeeping items. We are going to move to going paperless for committee members. Historically, we have been mailing out hard copies, but we are going to transition with the November meeting to only distributing electronic copies of the agenda packets, and moving forward, we will be distributing those agenda packets 10 days in advance of the meeting to our committee members. And then one other update of sort of a national concern. National drinking water standards are set to be established for PFOA and PFOS, and US EPA is also going to continue investigating other forms of these compounds for future similar regulations. And lastly, we've talked about our strategic visioning process, and just wanted to kind of give the update for future committee consideration. This process will take 2 agenda postings, one for sort of discussion and direction of the visioning process, and then another for action which would most likely include initiation of an ad hoc committee. So staff is looking to bring these items to you for discussion in November, and then action most likely in the February meetings. And then that visioning process would take place in 2022. So I'd be happy to take any questions on those update items.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
It's Betty. I have a quick question. Amanda, if we do see, as I understand this national standard for PFOS and PFOA, I believe we do have some wells or some water supplies in the south part of Orange County that may be potentially impacted. I guess we also would be looking to hear what the state will do once there is the obligation for a national standard, because the state could always set a more restrictive standard than the national standard. So that still is up in the air as to how they will react, how the state will react to what EPA does. But I guess my question is off into the future, as we're looking at IRWM projects, if we do need to consider projects locally that help for remediation where this might exist, I guess I would assume that that could potentially be important to enough to water supply to be within the framework of IRWM. So I don't know if that's a question or maybe just something to think about for the future inside of the strategic visioning, as well as the protection of our water supplies.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great topic to be considered during the strategic visioning process, and I think, you know, the IRWM process always looks at, you know, I mean, the goal is integrated water management, so I could see that playing a role, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you, Amanda.
All right, thank you.
I see it. Roger Buto's hand is raised.
My apologies, I didn't see that. Roger?
Yes, am I live?
Yes.
Okay, first is a comment. Ms. Carr, I would strongly encourage you and your agency to right what I believe is a wrong, or let's just call it a hole. I am noting here that they're listed as panelists. I assume these are committee members, but their names are hidden. The people are not served when transparency and accountability is not there, and having their names. I noticed when you hit attendees, you see a list of about a dozen people, but I cannot for the life of me discern, nor am I able to get to who the actual quote. Now they're listed as panelists. I'm assuming these are committee members. So I would strongly encourage you in the future to reveal all. I remember at the first meeting a while back, and you guys have remedied that, there was not even the ability to chat or anything. So thank you for your upgrades. But once again, as a public NGO rep, I have the right to know who exactly attends and is listening and who is not sending representation. Moving on, I would make a comment about your Aliso Creek remarks, Ms. Carr. Thank you for the Pollyanna whistle through the graveyard version of how the Aliso Creek meetings are taking place. Back in the the late 90s, I attended Aliso Creek Watershed meetings. I was the only NGO rep to attend. Back then, for those that are still listening, it was estimated to be approximately $1 million a mile, square mile, for the rehab of the entire Aliso Creek watershed. Now we're down to approximately, and by the way, that was, like I said, around 35 to 40 million. Now we're talking about a like amount of money from the estuary up through approximately Pacific Parkway in Aliso Viejo. Same like amount of money for about 6 miles of the main stem. So that's a considerable, and it's the same amount of money. So really it's more like it's now going to cost 4 to 5 times as much as it would have 23 years ago when all of these watershed meetings were launched. More importantly, and I want to be adamant and very clear on this to the county and anyone else that's an Aliso Creek stakeholder, Clean Water Now is opposed, as they are proposed, the 3 alternatives for the estuary restoration. We are opposed to all three iterations that we have been made privy to. We have studied them in depth, and we feel it needs a program EIR. That's because it needs to be done in a phased master plan way, and we believe the proper agency as lead is in fact the county. We have a great deal of confidence in county parks. We have very little in OC Public Works. As far as in Aliso Creek, we also believe, even though it's only 6 miles of the main stem, we believe that there are literally dozens. I believe you identified 27 prospective projects. If that doesn't cry out for a program EIR, I don't know what does. So we'll be vehemently opposed to whatever the county does unless it includes a program EIR. To this day, no one has uttered the word program EIR for either the estuary or the main stem, and we will be adamant and resolute and vigilant. So thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, Roger.
I have just a brief comment for Amanda. Thank you very much for your executive officer report, and I really appreciate you adding the strategic visioning. You know, it's been a decade, maybe not a decade, since we got together, and I know Chair Neves was very appreciative of having you move this forward. So thank you for putting that as our go forward item, and I see we need to post it a couple times, but I'm very much interested in being part of that, and so looking forward to helping you any way I can. I was there at the initial visioning, and so I'm happy to be a part of it. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Great. Oh, and you know what? I remembered I had one more of a housekeeping item for our committee members. Could I give a gentle nudge and reminder to folks to make sure that they respond to the quorum call? So we have a full RSVP. We were a bit, it was a little bit of a nail biter, whether or not we would make quorum today. And so if folks could please respond to the quorum call email so we have a sense before the meeting whether or not we're going to hit that target, I would really appreciate it. So thank you so much for that. And then also, if you're not able to, if you need your alternate to attend for you, please let us know that as well. Because if we have to continue meetings via WebEx, we do have to do some arrangements for the alternate to be able to come in as a panelist. So just those two minor housekeeping, but thank you so much.
Yes, and this is Tiffany, and I apologize. I was running like 10 minutes late trying to get it on my phone. So Amanda, note well taken. And I also want to sort of foot stomp what Sandra Jacobs was saying as far as looking at the visioning and that as well. So so thank you, and great afternoon, great presentations this afternoon. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, that brings us to executive committee member comments. We're closing in on the 4:30, so why don't we do, if somebody has some member comments they'd like to share, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I had one and had to do with the mute. When I clicked on the mute earlier, when I was trying to indicate that I was present, it couldn't, and it's possible that the host hadn't unmuted, but I do notice over at the right, you can hit it. I thought we were to do the one at the bottom. Are they equal? See the microphone to the right of your name, the far right, in the panelist list? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, they are. Yes. They are the same.
Okay, so they're equal. If you want to unmute yourself, either one is, and also touching the space bar, I know that, but I did do that and I couldn't unmute, so I wasn't sure if it was the host. And then are those two equal? Did you say yes or no? I didn't hear.
Yes, the buttons next to your name and the big mute button on the bottom is the same. They are equal.
And also to follow up on that, if you want to use the space bar, you would have to hold the space bar down the entire time to speak.
Great, thank you. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other executive committee member comments?
I have a quick one. I'd just like to thank you, Tiffany, for doing a great job and for staff bringing this in on time. I looked at the agenda and I thought, how are they going to do this? So kudos all around, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last call. Any executive committee member comments?
Chair Ackley, this is Jenna. I would like to just chime in here, given that this is for executive committee members. Because of what Carol said, I did want to note that we had several executive committee members join after the fact. They are shown on the panelist list. However, I did want to just say out loud that we had Debbie Neve, Mike Frost, Carol Moore, Kevin Onuma representing Lisa Bartlett, and Betty Burnett representing the Water Authority. I just wanted to let everyone know that they did join after our initial call.
Great, thank you. All right, with no more comments, that will bring us to an adjournment, and our next meeting is scheduled for November 4th, 2021. And everyone have a good rest of your day and stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Good meeting. Good job, Ashley.